welcome back. If you're new here, I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not entertainment. What you're about to hear isn't a thriller. There are no actors, no scripts, no resurrection at the end of the episode. The names in these files belong to real people, and in far too many of them, those people are children. Tonight, we are cracking open two of the most psychologically devastating case files I have ever brought to this desk. The first, Me Jordan, 6 years old, Calgary, Canada. A child who collected ladybugs because, and I want you to hold this, she believed even insects deserved to go home to their families. That was the kind of soul we lost. The second, Lisa Irwin, 10 months old, Kansas City, Missouri, vanished from her crib in the dead of night. No forced entry, no witnesses, no body. And a mother who, 72 hours after her infant disappeared into the darkness, was seen sitting in a salon chair, getting a manicure. These two cases, separated by borders and years, share one brutal common thread. The people sworn to protect these children didn't. Not the guardians, not the system, not the institutions built with the specific mandate to catch moments exactly like these before they became obituaries. So here is what we are doing tonight. We are not rubbernecking at tragedy, we are dissecting it. We are pulling back every layer: the forensics, the psychology, the courtroom failures, the red flags that were visible long before the 911 call was ever made. Because every case I bring you is a blueprint, a map of the warning signs that, if you know how to read them, could one day be the difference between a close call and a case file. Before we step through that door, I need to be direct with you. Trigger warning. This episode contains detailed accounts of child death and infant disappearance. If you are a parent, if you have ever held a small hand in yours, the weight of what follows will be significant. Proceed with that awareness. For everyone still with me, pull up a seat. Lock the door. The file on Mia Jordan and Lisa Irwin is now open. Let's begin.
Mika was in trouble for lying that day, and I was trying to get her to do 20-25 jumping jacks to get her out of her trouble.
There's no way, based on the information that we have, that this could be anything else but a homicide.
I don't believe that, honestly.
Well, you're gonna have to start believing it.
I didn't do any of this. I'm sorry, but I did not.
Today, we are declassifying one of the most soul-crushing files in the history of Canadian criminal justice. A 6-year-old's life was snuffed out by the very people sworn to be her sanctuary. Consider this a trigger warning. The psychological weight of this case is heavy, particularly for those with children. November 13th, 2011. A frantic 911 call shatters the silence of the Calgary Dispatch Center. A trembling female voice on the line. Dispatcher. Calgary 91. 1. State your emergency. Dispatch. Police or medics? Medics. My little girl. She took a fall down the stairs. She's unresponsive. She's out cold. Dispatch. Emergency units are en route. Do not hang up this phone. Confirm the victim's age. She is 6. 6 years old. Is she showing any signs of consciousness? Negative. Repeat. Negative. Is there any respiratory activity? No. I do not think she is breathing at all. First responders found Mia Jordan blue and breathless. The transport to the pediatric unit was a desperate race against time. 16 hours of medical intervention proved futile. At 13:47 on November 14th, they officially called her time of death. What dark forces converged on this child? Whose fingerprints are on this catastrophe? We're dissecting a 6-year legal war for justice. This isn't merely a tragedy. It's an indictment of the system. This is a hunt for the objective truth and a mother's relentless pursuit of closure. Note the following. This report serves as a forensic analysis to educate the public on identifying red flags in child safety cases. Mia's legacy forced a systemic overhaul of Canadian child welfare, making this an essential case study for public safety. The following data is synthesized from verified court transcripts, presented with the gravity such a case demands. My objective is pure prevention. We analyze the past to shield the future from such horrors. Before we dive into the evidence locker, I need you to assist this investigation. Acknowledge this report with your engagement. Maximum visibility is required for these psychological profiles to reach the masses. Awareness is our primary weapon. Spotting the indicators early can disrupt the cycle of violence against children. Joining this network ensures this critical data reaches the front lines of every community. Report your location and local time in the field notes below. I am tracking the reach of this intelligence. We need to map the global impact of this message. Every data point on your origin helps the cause. Your localized report might be the beacon that alerts a neighbor to the dangers hiding in plain sight. These metrics aren't just statistics. They represent lives potentially saved through shared situational awareness. Gratitude for your vigilance. Case file: Mia Jordan. Born December 11th, 2004, in Calgary to Kayla and Spencer. At the time of her termination, she was 6. Physical profile: 46 inches tall, weighing a mere 46 pounds. Biometrics do not capture the essence of the subject. She was a beacon of light in a dark world. Maya projected pure innocence, a vibrant soul who expressed herself through music, movement, and her beloved skateboard. Her psychological profile was one of extreme resilience and infectious joy, a rare light in the investigative darkness. Environmental factors did not faze her. She maintained a high baseline happiness regardless of her surroundings or the weather. Observations from Kayla and Brian noted her high pain tolerance. Physical stumbles never elicited a tearful response. She would simply reset and continue her mission. Her primary surveillance target in nature? Small ladybugs she would carefully collect. She would detain them briefly in a glass enclosure before granting them a full pardon and release. The motive? Her reasoning. Even insects experience familial longing. This level of empathy in a 6-year-old was analytically profound. She possessed an innate ability to extract positivity from even the most suboptimal circumstances. Logistical failures due to storms did not trigger distress. She simply adapted her tactics to enjoy the downpour instead. Her default facial expression remained a constant, unwavering smile, a chilling contrast to what would follow. Gazing at the vibrant smile in these photographs, the mind recoils at the realization that her journey would conclude so prematurely and so violently. What steps do you believe a guardian must take to truly insulate a child from the predators in plain sight? I want to see your perspective in the brief below. Your observation might serve as a vital warning for another household. I will be reviewing your insights. The domestic situation surrounding the Jordans was a fracture waiting to split. Spencer and Kayla Jordan existed in a state of constant friction. Yet in 2006, they brought a second life into that environment, a son they named Lee. The arrival of the infant only accelerated the decay of the marriage, leading to a 2009 divorce that quickly devolved into a scorched earth custody battle. Both parties fought for total control. Ultimately, the magistrate mandated a shared parenting arrangement. Micah and Lee were shuttled between two worlds, a rotating schedule that seemed manageable only because both parents remained within the same city limits. 2 years into this cycle, the landscape shifted. Kayla remarried a man named Brian Woodhouse, while Spencer moved in with a new partner, Marie McCoon. By the time the clock ran out for Micah, Marie was established as Spencer's common-law spouse. The children continued their rhythmic migration between homes. By 2011, the Woodhouse residence was preparing for its 4th child. Perhaps it was the stability and affection provided by her mother and stepfather, but Micah and her younger brother were occasionally defiant, typical children pushed by their own boundaries. Kayla and Brian maintained a psychological rapport with the kids, a connection that Spencer and his new partner conspicuously lacked. Despite the instability of living out of a suitcase between two households, Micah presented as a resilient, and high-spirited child. However, the moment she crossed the threshold into her father's house, her behavior shifted toward rebellion and visible defiance. This friction aggravated Marie Machen, who had no maternal experience and seemingly zero patience for a child's complexity. But the investigative reality is simple. Maka wasn't a problem child. She was a girl who looked for the light in every shadow. Did the community fail to see the darkening clouds inside Spencer's residence? The evidence suggests the warning signs were already there. Weeks before Maka's life was extinguished, Kayla and Brian had flagged Alberta Child and Family Services, reporting physical trauma found on Maka's body after a visit with her father. It was a critical alarm, yet the authorities failed to grasp the magnitude of the escalating violence. Take a moment to analyze this. If you observed a child displaying these indicators, what would be your tactical response? How frequently does our society glance at the obvious evidence of a child in distress and choose to look away? If this deep dive into the psychological profile of this case resonates, engage with the video. We will continue to dissect these behavioral red flags in future briefings. Thursday, November 10th, 2011. This was the 0 hour for the final tragedy. An incident occurred involving Maka's hand that day. Her physiological state was deteriorating, and the injury demanded immediate surgical intervention. Yet, rather than seeking a trauma center, Spencer and Marie made a tactical decision to suppress the information, hiding the injury from Maka's mother. That same afternoon, a digital search was conducted for home remedy treatments, a transparent attempt to treat a severe trauma without alerting medical professionals. Near midnight on Friday, November 12th, Marie finally placed a call to the HealthLink medical hotline regarding the child's hand. Throughout the intake, her narrative was carefully constructed to mislead. HealthLink, state your emergency. Hi, yes, I have a quick inquiry. Proceed. My daughter. Yesterday, she had an accident with a hair straightener. I see. What is the status of the injury? It doesn't look catastrophic, but it has developed a blister. Understood. It's on the palm. I'm wondering if I should drain it, since the skin is starting to desiccate. Okay, is the blister significant? It's a large pocket of fluid, but I assume that was just due to the location on her hand. Noted. What is the child's age? 6. Was she operating the device? No, absolutely not. I simply caught her tampering with it. I understand. Most adults struggle with those high-heat tools anyway. This was a professional iron. It reaches 400 degrees. Yes, that is extreme heat. Identify the patient, please. Maka Jordan. Is she expressing any pain in the affected area? No. She says she feels absolutely nothing. That is a significant clinical concern. Serious burns are typically agonizing. Right. What is the coloration of the site? It's white. It looks completely white. That confirms the severity. A third-degree burn is characterized by that white, charred appearance. Hardly a believable story, is it? It was as if she felt no physical sensation from the searing flesh on her hand. This anomaly posed a significant tactical hurdle for Marie and Spencer. Per the court-mandated custody schedule, the child and her brother were slated for return to their biological mother that Saturday. To circumvent the inevitable exposure of their actions, Spencer initiated a deceptive contact with his former wife, fabricating a narrative about Marie deserting him to buy more time with the children. Marie validated the lie via message. Their objective was simple: conceal the physical evidence on the child's hand that would have immediately alerted Kayla. The mother conceded, first for 24 hours, eventually pushing the return date out to November 15th. Try to conceptualize the psychological isolation that 6-year-old girl endured during those lost days. Cases like this demand our collective vigilance. Spreading awareness helps identify patterns of abuse and can quite literally save lives. But the damage to her hand was merely the opening act of a much darker sequence. Throughout that entire weekend, the atmosphere in that house shifted from neglect to something far more terminal for the girl. By Friday evening, November 11th, M.A. was exhibiting signs of total physiological collapse. Her strength was failing rapidly. Whenever she attempted to voice her distress, the psychological pressure in the room spiked. It was an agonizing, exhausting evening for the child. Saturday, November 12th, brought no reprieve. The subject spent the daylight hours in a state of profound lethargy and physical weakness. She was suffering from acute malnourishment, pleading for basic sustenance and a few drops of water to stay hydrated. The day dragged on as her reserves depleted. By nightfall, her motor functions were barely operational and she was spent. Sunday, November 13th, would prove to be the final, most brutal chapter of the child's short life. Spencer prioritized a televised football game over a dying child. Her whimpering for help was treated as an unwanted distraction, escalating the domestic tension. She had reached a state of total physical collapse. Her basic needs, food, the bathroom, sleep, were voiced as desperate, failing whispers. Her only remaining desire was the silence of sleep. Throughout Sunday, the 6-year-old engaged in a heartbreaking attempt at compliance, promising to be better and try harder, hoping to appease her captors. She couldn't comprehend why her world had turned so cold. She was just a child looking for a hand to hold or some water. In the terminal hours before the emergency services were contacted, M.A. had reached a state of total physical exhaustion. When her failing body could no longer follow their commands, the situation turned increasingly violent. The child spent her last conscious moments trying to please them. Eventually, the physiological trauma became too much, and she simply stopped responding. She had literally exhausted every ounce of her will trying to meet their impossible standards of good. With the child dying nearby, Marie resumed the mundane task of baking cookies, a chilling display of total psychological detachment. Not until 7:18 that evening, when the girl's condition became impossible to ignore, did Marie finally dial 911. First responders discovered the girl unresponsive at the base of a carpeted staircase in a state of critical physiological failure. The lead medic immediately initiated life-saving protocols. It makes you wonder, what would you do if you heard a child's muffled cries? Any of us might encounter such a situation. Your insights on how to handle these moments are valuable. Leave them in the comments. Your personal experience could be a lifeline for someone else. At the medical center, Dr. Guilfoyle took over the case. The diagnostic imaging told a story that contradicted the suspect's narrative. The doctors saw the injuries weren't consistent with their claims. Despite the intervention of the surgical team, M.A. was pronounced dead at 1:47 on the afternoon of November 14th. The forensic autopsy revealed a timeline of trauma spanning several days and systematically dismantled the couple's fabrication of an accidental tumble down the stairs. Detectives moved in. During the formal interrogation, Spencer and Marie clung to their scripted story of a tragic mishap. Efforts to secure a statement from the younger brother were hindered by the boy's manifest state of absolute terror. The investigation hit a wall as she described the assault violently and repeatedly shaking the child's hands with frantic, repetitive speed. I couldn't tell if her heart was still beating. I just kept asking why she couldn't just follow her father's instructions. Her lack of cooperation was putting both of our futures in serious trouble. Because I didn't want to deal with her anymore, and Spencer's rage was at a breaking point, he wasn't going to stop. I stood over her, clutching her hand in a fit of anger, and she just went limp through her shoulder. Why couldn't she just do it? It wasn't just a single moment of frustration. It was a sustained, repetitive assault on the child. I was looming over her, clutching her small hand, and I just let the anger take over. I just kept shaking. Do you grasp the implications? Her physical agony commenced that Thursday. I recall a heightened agitation regarding that 4-inch gap. The atmosphere felt increasingly fragile. Observers noted a rift between Spencer and Miss Strayer, but the reality was far more volatile. I clearly remember the domestic escalation that preceded her fatal fall down the stairs. My marital resentment eventually transitioned into physical aggression directed toward my daughter. I refrained from striking her, opting instead for a forceful shove. She collapsed backward onto the masonry, the impact being unmistakable. I performed a cursory assessment. I assumed she had recovered, failing to realize the severity of the internal damage. She was gone by the following morning. Can you confirm the specific date? Saturday, the 12th, was the primary impact. The 13th marks the staircase fall and 911 call. We were analyzing the nature of deception earlier today. Dishonesty was a psychological trigger. She mirrored her biological mother's traits, not her stepmother's. Her lies acted as a catalyst for my rage, pushing me toward a breaking point. This anger resulted in repeated trauma to the side of her head. I subjected her to multiple heavy strikes to the occipital region. She appeared intermittently lucid throughout the duration of that final day. She had undergone a total personality shift. The child I knew was gone. Her typical buoyancy had vanished, yet my hostility toward her remained unchanged. The details are blurred, but I delivered a strike to her abdomen that caused a collapse. We proceeded through the rest of the day as if nothing had occurred. Following a meal, I was watching television when I heard her strike the base of the staircase. I pivoted toward the sound and called out to confirm her status. Receiving no verbal response, I approached her and repeated the command. She remained unresponsive. I relocated her to the bathroom, assuming a temporary loss of consciousness. I applied cold water to her face to stimulate a neurological response. Once I confirmed respiratory arrest, I moved her and initiated manual resuscitation. I directed Marie to contact 911. That is the timeline of events. Is it your theory that Marie inflicted the cranial injuries? Hearing that voice triggered a psychological breakthrough. I remember a specific, violent event now. I have a fractured memory of her hoisting the child off the floor in a display of dominance. She was suspending her entirely by the upper limbs. I am uncertain of the exact elevation. Perhaps the height of an adult standing. Why persist with this deception? I was there. I witnessed your actions. Regardless of the height, the traumatic impact occurred on that second-floor tile. Observers at the memorial service noted a jarring discrepancy in emotional response. The stepfather, Brian, was visibly broken, while Spencer, the biological father, maintained a cold indifference. Nearly 1 year later, investigators deployed the Mr. Big psychological strategy. Undercover operatives infiltrated their lives, posing as a criminal syndicate designated safe and sound in heaven. The operation was massive, utilizing 158 dedicated personnel. Following months of covert rapport building, the couple finally surrendered their secrets. They detailed the precise nature of the trauma inflicted upon the child during those final days. They admitted full culpability. In 2012, Jordan and Memcon were finally detained for the homicide. I have always claimed a deep devotion to children. She was being penalized for lying. I mandated 25 jumping jacks as a form of physical discipline. The evidence suggests only one possible outcome: a homicide. This was no accident. It was a deliberate killing. They refuse to believe it, but reality is coming for them. The suspect denies everything, claiming complete innocence in this matter. I am innocent. Your entire theory is wrong. This is a mistake. I never laid a hand on her. It was either me or Spencer. Admit there were no other suspects, Mary. Just give me the truth. If not me, then who? I have no answers. How do we grade the investigation? Did the field agents miss the signs? Discuss your findings below. In 2014, they were charged with first-degree murder. The courts excluded the undercover evidence, ruling the sting operation's findings inadmissible. Still, the prosecution mapped a dark pattern of chronic abuse by the father and his partner. A mother's agony is palpable as she hears how her child was systematically broken. She maintained her composure until the final gavel, then collapsed outside the courtroom. By June 2015, they received 17 years for second-degree murder, with no possibility of early parole. The family viewed the 17-year sentence as far too lenient. They argued the perpetrators acted with calculated intent over a long period. Seeking harsher penalties, the family initiated several legal appeals. In November 2017, 6 years later, the appellate court made a rare intervention. The conviction was upgraded to first-degree murder, a ruling later upheld by high courts. Accountability was finally achieved. Was the ultimate punishment truly sufficient? Is our legal system equipped for this? Support this briefing by sharing the details. Vigilance is our only weapon to ensure the safety of the most vulnerable. The victim's toys and letters are now artifacts of a life cut short. Her brother wears a pendant containing her ashes and a small ladybug charm. They visit her memorial in the garden. May her soul finally rest. This case file serves as a grim warning about the necessity of protecting children. If this tragedy resonates, share this report and subscribe. What societal changes would prevent such a failure? Your perspective could save a child. What red flags should we monitor? How should one respond to suspected abuse? Your insights are valuable. Spreading these facts helps build a safer social environment. We all act as a secondary defense when we identify these predatory patterns. I appreciate your focus during this difficult investigative briefing. We are opening a file on a mystery that devastated the American heartland, a case that turned neighborhoods into fortresses and still offers no definitive answers. Warning: the following psychological profile and facts are deeply disturbing. 14 years without justice. If you are prepared for the cold truth, stay focused. Log your city and time below. How long does it take for a life to vanish? 10 minutes? 1 hour? Or the few seconds it takes to leave a window or door unsecured? In October 2011, Kansas City witnessed a nightmare that defied all logic. An infant evaporates from a supposedly secure nursery. The coldest detail? 14 years later, we are still staring into a black hole of silence. This isn't merely a missing persons file. It is a forensic autopsy of a total institutional collapse. We are looking at law enforcement negligence and a maternal figure who prioritized cheap boxed wine over her own flesh and blood. This briefing explores why the trail went cold 14 years ago. I am requesting your tactical cooperation on this specific case file. Engage with this intelligence, disseminate the data across your networks, and report your current location and timestamp. This is about situational awareness. Every case file represents a silenced victim. These insights are designed to prevent future casualties in your own community. Expanding our search radius exposes the predatory threats lurking just beyond a compromised deadbolt or an unlocked door. We advocate for those who were erased from the record. Commencing the official dossier on subject Lisa Renee Irwin. Her entry into this world occurred during the bitter frost of November 2010. Physical description: fair hair, azure eyes, a distinct birthmark on the right femur, and 2 emerging primary lower incisors. Siblings referred to her as pumpkin pie. Behaviorally, the subject exhibited high levels of joy and social bonding within the domestic unit. The infant served as the family's nucleus, radiating warmth through her constant and disarming grin. Preferred diet: pasta and fruit. Emotional anchors included a bioluminescent plush toy. Socially, she mirrored the motor patterns of her older brothers. Bedding featured automotive motifs and prehistoric figurines. Standard lights-out protocol was established between 7 and 8 post-meridiem. The nursery door remained sealed to create an acoustic barrier against the rowdy activity of the other children in the residence. Observations suggest she was the adhesive holding the household together. Maternal testimony claimed she was the final piece of the family puzzle. She was the missing link. A primary developmental milestone, her very first birthday, was mere weeks away from the date of disappearance. The mother was in the preliminary stages of coordinating a modest celebration involving confections and decorative inflatables. This domestic tranquility was a fabrication. 25-year-old Deborah Bradley maintained a legal marriage to a military member named Shaw Bradley. The motive for staying wed? financial insolvency. $300 stood between her and a legal separation, a sum they simply lacked. This fiscal bottleneck offers a profound diagnostic of their actual economic instability behind closed doors. It reveals a bone-deep level of deprivation. Witnesses characterize Deborah as a chronic attention seeker with histrionic tendencies. Close associate Shirley Pfaff noted that Deborah's pathological need for the spotlight effectively isolated her social circle through forced public spectacles. The behavioral intensity often crossed the threshold into unmanageable and uncomfortable territory for those nearby. Erratic mood swings and public confrontations were standard. However, a more sinister pattern was emerging in the background of her life. Deborah documented her existence obsessively on digital platforms, broadcasting every indulgence and social gathering to the public web via Instagram. Her internal hierarchy of needs was evident, yet she maintained the facade of a devoted, nurturing caregiver for the camera. That was the curated profile. Up until the incident, she successfully projected the image of a flawless parental unit to the world. Jeremy Irwin, 29 years old, worked as a professional tradesman. He supported an 8-year-old son, Blake, from a prior union. Following a 2008 custody revocation, the boy resided with Jeremy, who exhibited signs of chronic fatigue from excessive labor. They formed a blended domestic unit, inhabiting a residence occupied by 2 young males and the infant female subject. Fiscal margins were razor-thin. Externally, they presented as the standard, unremarkable blueprint of suburban Americana. Beneath the surface, an underlying psychological friction was palpable to external observers and visiting friends. The North Lister Avenue property mirrored its surroundings, a neighborhood where residents maintained casual surveillance and children occupied the perimeter. The optic was one of absolute tranquility, a suburban idyll that felt suspiciously curated and almost too perfect to be real. A structural flaw existed in this domestic landscape, ignored until it was too late. Observe the initial red flag that was dismissed. 7 days prior to the abduction, multiple reports reached dispatch regarding an unidentified male loitering near the local playgrounds. Description: thin build, roughly 40 years of age. Law enforcement filed the intelligence but initiated zero tactical follow-up on the suspect. Insufficient grounds for detention, they claimed. Yet, true predators thrive within the gaps of such systemic institutional apathy. Moving the investigation timeline back 30 days before the subject vanished, Child Protective Services received an anonymous tip citing welfare concerns at the specific residence on Lister Avenue. The reporting party noted nocturnal distress from the infant and erratic parental behavior. A caseworker logged the intake, deferring the site visit. The intervention was delayed repeatedly until the file was effectively buried under administrative debris and excessive workloads. Consider the implications. The safety net, meant to catch the most fragile, was essentially offline and asleep. Log your observations below. Have you witnessed this type of bureaucratic negligence in your own sector? October 3rd, 2011, began with the deceptive mask of an ordinary day. Nothing signaled the psychological horror waiting in the shadows. Around 1400 hours, Jeremy returned from his shift. He played the part of the devoted father, sharing a final lunch with his children. It was a domestic tableau of peace. In retrospect, it was the final moment before that peace was permanently shattered. By 1630, Deborah and her brother, Philip Netz, headed to the local market. A routine supply run for a struggling household. Surveillance logs the essentials: baby food, diapers, and a $40 box of wine. This is the detail that an investigator cannot ignore. They claimed a $300 divorce was financially impossible, yet $40 is sacrificed for alcohol on a Monday afternoon. $40. That is half a week of sustenance for those children. Her priorities were laid bare on that grocery receipt. This purchase is more than evidence. It is a psychological red flag that forces us to scrutinize her very core as a mother. 1730. Jeremy departs for a rare night shift at a construction site. The timing of this departure feels tragically calculated. He is heading to a Starbucks site. This detail is chilling. On this specific night, the home's primary protector was pulled away. As Jeremy leaves, the perimeter is breached by his absence. For the first time in months, the family stands entirely vulnerable. While authorities slept, the clock was ticking. No one realized that the threshold of safety had already been crossed forever. 1840. Deborah places Lisa in her crib. The child is wearing purple shorts and a t-shirt featuring white kittens. She drifts off, clutching her blanket. It is a scene of deceptive normalcy that precedes a total collapse of the family unit. Here is where the timeline fractures. This peaceful evening was merely the silent prelude to an enduring, waking nightmare. 1800 hours. Samantha Brando arrives. Her young daughter joins the Irwin children for a playdate on the edge of an abyss. To any passerby, it was just another quiet house. But inside, the psychological landscape was shifting toward catastrophe. This was the last moment the residents felt secure. The women moved to the porch as the wine box began its steady drain. Deborah's consumption was aggressive. Later, her estimates would fluctuate wildly, claiming anywhere from 5 to 10 glasses. Samantha later admitted they finished the entire box in 4 hours. As the wine flowed, Deborah's grasp on her surroundings dissolved. She initially claimed a 10 p.m. welfare check on the infant. That was the first version of her shifting truth. Under interrogation, the story crumbled. She had not looked into that nursery since 1840. The child was left to the darkness. The glass count kept rising. First 2, then 5, then 10. A fluid narrative is a hallmark of profound negligence or guilt. Consciousness faded with every pore. As an investigator, I ask, what behavioral tremors did we miss before the earthquake hit? Share your thoughts below. If you were the neighbor witnessing this, what would have been your breaking point? 22:30. Samantha departs. Deborah claims she is retiring for the night. The house goes dark, but it is not empty. The reality is a blackout. Lights, locks, and security were all abandoned to chance by a mother lost in a chemical fog. Only fragments of memory remain. The older son in his room, the younger one beside her. The rest is a void. Exhaustion and alcohol formed a black veil. While she slept, the unthinkable was already manifesting within those 4 walls. 03:30. Jeremy finishes his shift and begins the drive home, likely thinking of nothing but the comfort of sleep. Fatigue weighs heavy on him as he pulls into the driveway around 0400 hours. His instincts are about to scream. The house is glowing. Every light is burning. For a family struggling with bills, this was an immediate, glaring anomaly. He reaches the entrance. The door is unlocked. The first line of defense had been left wide open to the night. A damaged screen, an open window in the computer room. The cold air of a crime scene fills the hallway. The atmosphere is wrong. Jeremy moves toward Lisa's bedroom, his pace quickening as the silence begins to feel heavy. The crib is empty. The blanket and the glowworm toy remain, but the life has vanished. A father's ultimate horror realized. Imagine that sudden hollow void, the physical weight of a missing child. Describe that realization in the comments. Jeremy storms into the bedroom, shaking Deborah awake. Where is Lisa? Where is our daughter? The question hangs in the air. Deborah struggles through the haze. What are you talking about? She is in her bed. The denial is instinctive and cold. Then, the fog clears. She sees the raw, unadulterated panic in Jeremy's eyes. The reality of the situation finally takes hold. A frantic, disorganized sweep of the house begins. 2 ghosts searching for a soul that has been erased from the room. He checks every closet and under every bed, hoping for a miracle or a mistake. But the silence is absolute. Deborah runs into the night, screaming her daughter's name into a neighborhood that is still fast asleep. Jeremy reaches for a phone to call 911. Nothing. Every mobile device in the residence has been systematically removed. 3 phones. 1 broken, 1 work, 1 spare. All vanished. Whoever took Lisa ensured that the family was completely silenced. 4 in the morning. Jeremy reaches for the receiver, his hands shaking. He chokes out the words every parent dreads. My little girl is gone. 10 months old, snatched right out of her nursery. Within 15 minutes, the flashing lights were already cutting through the dark. What they found was a house ablaze with lights and 2 parents on the brink of collapse. A single window stood wide open, a silent invitation to tragedy. October 4th, the Amber Alert hit the wires. Kansas City didn't just wake up, it stood up to help. A sea of volunteers flooded the pavement, searching for a ghost. But as the clock ticked, hope began to suffocate under the weight of silence. Before we dig deeper into this file, I need your cooperation on 2 critical fronts. First, secure this briefing in your records and pass it to anyone who understands the stakes of protecting our children. Second, leave your mark in the field notes below. Offer a word of solidarity for those still trapped in the nightmare of a missing child. Every signal boost matters. It's the only way to keep the spotlight on Lisa and the countless others whose faces are fading on posters. Back to the case. 24 hours later, the Bureau officially stepped in. We scoured every ditch, every dry well, and every rotting structure. Nothing. Then, the narrative took a darker, more internal turn. The lens shifted toward the parents. At the stroke of midnight, the digital trail spat out an anomaly. A 5-second burst of data, a call from a missing handset to a Megan Wright. A name that meant absolutely nothing to the parents. That name led us to a local drifter, John Tanko, they called him Jersey. This is where the failure becomes personal. Jersey was no stranger to handcuffs, 3 counts of burglary. He'd even been picked up lurking around daycares. He was a known entity. They knew his habits, knew he preferred the window as a point of entry, knew he had a predatory fixation on families. Despite the warnings, the system remained idle. 0 action taken. 3 separate sightings placed a man on the street at midnight, clutching an infant. The child was half naked in the 45-degree chill. 1 witness pointed at Jersey's mugshot. The other 2 weren't so sure. An alibi and a lack of hard proof kept Jersey on the street. Once again, the truth vanished into the shadows. October 19th. The 9 units were brought in to sweep the Irwin residence. These were scent specialists trained for recovery. 1 dog flagged the master bedroom, but without physical evidence, it only fed the public's growing paranoia. The alert was eventually written off as inconclusive. But by then, the poison of doubt had already spread. The spotlight intensified on Deborah. The logic behind it was cold and calculated. Timeline inconsistencies are a red flag. First, she claims 10 p.m. Then, she walks it back to 6:40. A massive gap in her story. The alcohol consumption kept shifting, 2 from a couple of drinks to maybe 5 or even 10. The narrative was fluid, unstable. But this next part, this is what shakes your belief in the bond between mother and child. Reviewing the interrogation tapes, there's a jarring anomaly. Deborah laughs while discussing her vanished daughter. It wasn't a nervous tic or the product of trauma. It felt hollow, completely out of place for the situation. Imagine your infant is gone, and you're giggling at the detectives. But the inconsistencies don't stop there. That evening, Deborah and a neighbor finished an entire box of wine together. She confessed to being blacked out, unable to recall the hours when her home was breached. In the dark, anything can happen. The interrogation stretched into a marathon of questioning. When the polygraph was put on the table, she took the bait. The results came back as a failure. She wept, claiming she was being framed as the scapegoat. Outside that room, the public was already drawing battle lines. You either saw a grieving victim or a guilty woman. Months later, A formal demand for justice gathered thousands of signatures online. The charges leveled against them were brutal and unyielding. They pointed to a 12-hour window of total neglect. They also dug into her medical history, highlighting her use of antidepressants. The betrayal went deeper when her former inner circle, including her best friend Shirley, broke their silence. "Once I saw the mask slip, I couldn't believe I'd ever let her into my life," her friend admitted. She described a duality, a warmth that could instantly freeze into a stranger you'd never want to meet. "It's all a performance," she said. "The tears are a switch she can flip whenever she needs them." She called her a master manipulator. But as disturbing as that is, the psychological reality was even worse. Returning to the scene of the disappearance, the parents kept the nursery frozen in time. They still buy outfits she'll never wear and gifts for birthdays that pass in silence. They want her to know she was never forgotten. It's a narrative that breaks the heart. Yet for a trained investigator, it only heightens the scent of something buried deep. Does it sit right with you that the parents were never processed? No handcuffs, no courtroom drama, zero convictions. The witness statements were a shifting tide of contradictions. Theories floated from high-stakes trafficking to an under-the-table adoption ring. The local rumor mill was more pointed. The mother is the prime suspect. 10 years of silence have since frozen the trail. In 2013, a potential breakthrough emerged from a camp in Greece, a blonde, blue-eyed girl named Maria. Families across the globe held their breath, but the forensic evidence was cold. DNA ruled out any link to the missing child. By 2025, a fresh investigative deep dive surfaced in the form of a 6-part podcast series, 3 years of grueling fieldwork. Surveillance and covert recording devices were deployed during the high-stakes interrogation of Jersey Tenko. The probe claimed to have unearthed the missing pieces, perhaps even the truth itself. Yet, the definitive answer remains in the shadows. Analyze the anomalies, that 11:50, 7 p.m. phone call, the silent guard dogs, and the impossible stealth of the extraction. Was the mother truly incapacitated by alcohol? Or are we expected to believe an intruder walked through an unlocked door? Reconstruct the scene. Was this a domestic accident, sanitized by a frantic and desperate cover-up? Or a violent abduction that vanished into the night? Lisa would be 14 years old today, a teenager with a life we can only imagine. She should be navigating the halls of high school and first loves, unless she has already become a ghost. The most haunting variable is the unknown status of her life. Her disappearance left a permanent fracture in the Kansas City community. The mobilization was unprecedented, massive ground searches, and a media storm that refused to dissipate for years on end. A cold case of this magnitude serves as a grim psychological weight, a reminder of the scars left by unresolved human tragedies. For the parents, living in the vacuum of no closure is a psychological sentence with no end in sight. After that night, the collective psyche of the neighborhood shifted. Every deadbolt was checked and rechecked 3 times over. Every mother in the zip code spent her nights straining to hear the steady, safe rhythm of her child's breathing. Forensics continues to age her digitally, producing computer-generated composites of what a 3, 7, and 11-year-old Lisa might look like. A $100,000 bounty was placed on the truth by an anonymous benefactor seeking justice. The true horror isn't just the disappearance, it's the systematic failure of every safety net designed to protect the vulnerable. The authorities blinked, dismissing reports of a suspicious predator stalking local playgrounds just 7 days before she vanished. A critical welfare report regarding the infant sat gathering dust, forgotten by the very social services meant to intervene. The press cannibalized the tragedy, transforming a desperate search into a bidding war for exclusive neighbor testimonials. Networks prioritized ratings over recovery, turning raw grief into a televised spectacle. But then, there is the detail that chills the blood. Only 72 hours after her infant vanished into the night, Deborah was spotted in a salon chair getting a manicure. She sat for a hairstyling session while her 10-month-old baby was missing. In profiling, We look for these jarring deviations in behavior. Weigh the evidence and tell me, was this a tragedy that could have been intercepted by a more vigilant system? The most unsettling reality is that this threat is universal. Somewhere right now, a high-risk offender is slipping through a backlogged system. Somewhere else, a guardian is prioritizing a bottle of wine over the fundamental security of their own child. Somewhere in a quiet office, another vital report is being buried under a mountain of bureaucratic indifference. Steel locks are useless against a system that fails to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If a child can be taken from her own crib under these circumstances, then the concept of safety is an illusion. We are closing this briefing for now, but the file on Lisa Irwin remains wide open and stone cold. Stay informed and stay vigilant by keeping these briefings active. Every case file is a lesson in recognizing the subtle face of danger. Let this be a reminder. Security is not just about the hardware on your door, but the integrity of the world outside it. Study the other files in the archives. Disseminate the intelligence to those who need to hear it. Be the voice for the silenced. From an investigative standpoint, how do we begin to bridge these systemic gaps in protection? Put yourself in the shoes of the players in this drama. How would your choices have altered the final report? I appreciate your focus on this heavy investigative briefing. We will reconvene for the next case shortly. We speak for those who no longer have a voice. Today, 3620 North Lister Avenue presents as a perfectly normal home. New occupants, new memories. But the local residents still see the phantom beams of flashlights cutting through that dark October night. They still hear the echoes of a child's cry in the silence. They remember when their sanctuary became the stage for a waking nightmare. Unsolved cases never die. They simply watch from shadows.